Hi. Okay, great, it's working. Great. So I'm actually Claire Napawan. I'm an associate professor of landscape architecture at the University of California, Davis. I'm here today with my colleague Brett Snyder, who's still hiding. He'll be joining me soon for the Q&A. I'm here to talk to you about our participatory design project, Our Changing Climate. Our Changing Climate is an effort to diversify and expand the way that we understand climate change, and we do this through community-based networking. So for anybody who's had the privilege, the great privilege of getting to partake in Austin's amazing breakfast tacos, you might have already learned something that one of our workshop participants notes here, which is that guacamole costs extra, typically. But what you might not know is there's a relationship between that and climate change. So these are the images that usually folks conjure when they're thinking about climate change. This is how the media depicts climate change, and it's because of the kind of global and physical ways that we understand climate change is impacting our climate, or our planet, including diversity loss, habitat loss, melting of polar ice caps, severe storms like Hurricane Matthew. Excuse me. And with such large-scale, global, physical, and complex problems, sometimes it feels like the best ways to attack that is through to enlist the politicians and the climate scientists. And our actual individual experience of climate change or the role that we might play is a bit diminished when we talk about it in that way. I teach a climate class in the fall every year, and 9 times out of 10 when I ask students, do you know climate change is happening? Do you know what it is and how it's going to impact you? They all say, yeah, it's going on, it's out there. Temperatures are rising. Not so sure what that means to me. So Our Changing Climate is an effort to attack that problem, to think about making connections between the lived experiences of everyday community members and these large-scale global and complex issues. So we integrated with workshops piloted in the early 2015 in the San Francisco Bay Area. We integrated with communities most vulnerable to climate change, those are communities of color, and the youth set to inherit these challenges. Through those workshops, we asked students to use social media, something most of them are already really interested and familiar with, to talk about their everyday lives, where they commute, where they work and live, and link that to their understanding of climate change. We've expanded since then throughout Northern California, and our workshops now integrate analog as well as digital tools because not everybody has access or interest in social media. And so the analog tools do what the digital network does as well, which is to really encourage community members to interrogate their own neighborhoods and their own landscapes and evaluate it for climate change resilience as well as vulnerability. And here's just a few of the images as part of our growing digital network. Instead of sea level rise or desertification, students are talking about more local issues like the California drought, access to public health, or underfunded public transportation. In some cases, they were just talking about something as simple as whether there's trees on their street. And these are all related, we know, to vulnerability and resilience to climate change. I'm going to share with you one quick story. One of our participants, Nikki, yes, she thought she was going to be photographing images of severe weather, but instead she found herself indoors more often than not. She started to ask, how are the things that I'm seeing really related to climate change? She already had a habit of using Instagram to post her food. Okay. Can you finish that story? Yeah, thank you. Well, she started photographing food, and she realized that avocados tend to cost extra because they were out of season. They were either grown in greenhouses or they were shipped from Mexico. And so she started to realize that her future food availability might be impacted by climate change. But more importantly, she realized that her food choices today could have impact on mitigating some of the effects of long-term climate change. She said better than we can what we think our changing climate can do, and that is, I used to think climate change was for people smarter than me to talk about and think about, but now I know it really impacts everything and should involve everyone.
So this feels like it's very much a social and digital and word of mouth and educational campaign. Do you see any physical manifestation of this happening, and what does that look like, and how do you do that?
That's a great question, and in some ways, the way that we've worked has been to really think about the kind of range of ways in which social media plays a part in this, the way something as simple as the cards, something as simple as a tour where people are actually occupying space and looking at space and seeing it differently actually makes a difference. So I think that question of like, but is there something built? It is a kind of ongoing question for us, and there have been small portions of this project that we've done as kind of installations, but the hope with this project is that it can loop back into projects like the Rebuild by Design, thinking about ways in which the kind of documentation process can actually influence the building process.
How does this build on existing assets within the communities you're working in, and how does it embrace and nurture the inherent wisdom that already exists in these communities?
Well, I think that gets at the core of what we're trying to do, is not to sort of take the designer lens and say, we know how to fix this, we know what's right, we know what's wrong, but actually sort of go to the community and ask them how they see it. Some of the things that we think are wrong in our kind of professional trained design eyes actually working really well. And so we've been working with actually community-based organizations, so folks that are on the ground that have already built relationships with community members. One example is IC, which is the Institute for Sustainable Education, Economic and Environmental Design, run by Antwi Akam, and that's located in Oakland. So we look to existing established community groups to sort of integrate our workshops with, but at its core, it's looking for that community-based, local knowledge and expertise, and shedding light on the built environment in that way.
Was this a priority to the communities that you engaged?
It's interesting you say that, because yes and no. A lot of the community groups that we came to, they were sort of organizing on different principles, like, for example, equity, the urban Black experience. That was kind of one of the groups that we were integrating with. Another one was public space and public health and equity. And so what we found is really important is that these students had passions, they had interests, environmental justice, social justice, but the link between that and climate change in the built environment, the actual physical place, and that vulnerability and resilience within it wasn't something that necessarily was drawn yet. And so we really just kind of drew that link and gave that fuller picture of how those ideas are related. And that, I think that was the strength. Not telling them you need to be interested in climate change, but you're interested in equity.
Thank you.